Welcome to D Community Conversations. I am Mike Parker, and I am here right now with Martin Kinkelin, who is the lead maintainer of LDC, the LLVM-D language compiler, the LLVM-based D language compiler. Martin, thank you for joining me. This has been a long time coming.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I want to start today before we get to LDC. You know, the best place to start is always the beginning. So what was it? Was it little Martin who got into programming, or was it high school Martin or university Martin? How did it start for you? When did you get bitten by the programming bug, and how?
Cool. Yeah, it was a long time ago. I was very little at that time, so it was at elementary school, basically, where decided that I would become an IT guy in the future. How that came about, I'm not so sure. So one factor, the most dominant factor probably was that my father, as an engineer, was one of the early adopters of mobile phones and laptops as well, so particular laptops. So he gave me one of his old laptops just to play around with it. I think it was some word processing as the very first step, pressing the keyboard buttons, which I saw my father do all the time. So I did that myself. Wrote a little letter. I think it was a Christmas letter or something. That was my first, the first usage of computers. And I think then it was a book about the basic programming language, by one of my uncles or so, which I found, they're 10 or 15 years older than me. Yeah, I found a little book there and, read it or looked at it at least. And I thought, okay, there's some nice stuff that you can do with it. So one of the first things back then was when a friend of mine got his new computer with Windows 95 on it. Which was still DOS-based. We hacked the auto-exec-bat just to keep his brother out. You had to enter a little password or so, and that was one of the first things. Yeah, I guess it was just a fascination that you could do so many things with that little device. Which got me fascinated in some way. So it was very clear from a very early stage that I would become a programmer, at least do something with computers in the future. Basically nothing has really changed. It was just shortly before enlisting to the university that I thought, it was clear for such a long time that I would be doing this. Am I really sure about that? I mean, I was also interested in chemistry and physics, so I thought, am I really sure about? But I stuck with it, and
And here you are.
At university, here I am. Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead. At university, what you studied computer science there?
Back then, so that was 2003 when I joined the university in Vienna, in Austria. There was, I wasn't really sure. By then, the classical informatics university course didn't exist anymore, so it was already diversified. So I wasn't really sure what to do. So it was the bachelor things, the first 3 years, and then the master 2 years. And for the first 3 years, so what I did was software and information engineering. That was the classical approach, so the most classical course, resembling the old one. But for the master course, then I chose computer graphics because I was always interested in computer games. Just fascinated by the nice images produced by GPUs and CPUs at that time. And what really got me into it, I thought that it's kind of the one of the more advanced fields of programming requiring performance, and I was also fascinated by the tricks employed to get there, to mimic a virtual environment with the compute resources that the hardware has. And people came up with nice tricks. So reading up on common techniques like bump mapping, parallax mapping at that time, stuff like this. Thought, okay, nice little tricks. That's where they get the performance from. Thought, okay, these guys really know how to code. So I thought, okay, let's go into this. But I was that. Then there was. So I finished these studies in 2011, I think, the final stage. But that was basically the last time I really had anything to do with OpenGL and DirectX and all of that stuff. then the real world came into play. So look for jobs and finding jobs in that particular sector here in Europe, because where I'm from. So I'm from Italy originally. So but just in case you're wondering why you don't hear any Italian accent, that's just because I'm part of a German-speaking minority, a very small German-speaking minority in the most northern part of Italy. So my hometown is 40 kilometers from the Austrian border. That's also why I started in Austria, Vienna. Not the main reason, but it's kind of no-brainer.
So you're through those years of doing computer graphics and everything, were you mostly using C or C++? What was the primary language you were using then?
Yeah, so I think it was C++ all the way. I think mainly C++ at least. So for opening, it wasn't C, it was C++. And for my master thesis, for example, I used a combination of C++ and C#. So C++ for the performance part. So the master thesis, in a nutshell, it was just about reconstructing a multi-dimensional, so a tricubic B-spline based on a point cloud. So I had a point cloud with scalar values and try to reconstruct a nice, smooth, continuous volume in 3 dimensions, up to 3 dimensions, and then ray tracing that with the GPU. And so the reconstruction part, that's solving a linear system of equations, so that needed a lot of performance. So using C# or something was just out of the question, so I had to use C++ for that, including intrinsics, compile intrinsics, blah, 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 all of that. OpenMP for parallelization. And but for the GUI part, because I had many parameters to tweak all of that stuff, the visual part of it, the reconstruction part of it, many parameters, and doing that in C++ with Qt or whatever, was out of the question. So I used C# for that, because you have the nice what you see is what you get editor in the Visual Studio IDE. So I used that and had to use a third language, dialect, how was it called at the time? I think the C++/CLI or something. So the .NET part of it, as a bridge. So that one acted as a bridge between the GUI part in C# and the actual high-performance code in C++. And that's basically one of the first experiences I had where I thought, that mixture of languages it comes with many pain points, so ideally I'd like to avoid that. I would like to have a language which fits all of my use cases here, so being able to express everything in a single language makes everything simpler. And it was about around that time when I came across Andre's book, the D programming language, and at the time I thought, oh man, ticks many boxes. So many things I would have liked to see in the programming languages I was using at the time. So these seem to be the perfect, a very, very good solution. So something very close to what I would presumably have come up with if I had the time to think about everything. So I thought, okay, looks nice. But the main problem back then, so that was about 2012 or so. The main problem back then was that there was no Windows 64-bit support. So back then, at that time, I was almost completely Windows-based, so not really using Linux or so, just in some virtual machines for university works or so. So I thought, okay, Windows 64-bit support is missing. No compiler supports it properly. So that's how I got involved into the development as well.
So did you already have an interest in compilers before you found D?
Not at all.
Really? Wow.
Not in languages. No, for example, at university, I skipped the specific class about compilers because there was a rumor that it's not one of the simplest ones. So I thought, no real interest, so I'm just going to skip it. I'm going to do something else, which I kind of regret now because I'm basically missing all of the basics. I just kind of grew organically into that stuff. But didn't really take a lesson on that stuff.
Okay,
I wasn't really interested in compilers or languages.
Yeah, this surprises me because I mean the way you talk about the implementation details and everything in our meetings, I just assumed you had a strong background in it. That's a big surprise to me. So Your initial contributions to D then were they focused on DMD, or were you focused on LDC at the time?
Yeah, so the thing was, I already knew from the start I would be. So the original intent was to translate my master thesis to D, or at least part of it. So I already knew from the start I'm going to need performance, really good performance. So I'm not sure whether it was already extremely clear back then that DMD wasn't the proper choice for that with its own custom backend. But I already knew that there was LDC and I think GDC at that time as well. So I looked into, I don't think I really looked into GDC. It was just that LLVM was kind of new or modern at that time. So with a proper C++ API interface and not a C-like interface that GCC had or still has, I'm not sure. I just jumped on that train. Plus LDC already had some Windows support. I think it was some MinGW, the minimalistic GNU for Windows, but only for 32-bit. So I knew, so some support is in there, so I'll try to expand that to 64-bit Windows. And going to LDC for performance reasons.
So was Kai Naka in charge of LDC at the time when you were using it?
I think he was the main one. Yeah, there was still a time when both Kai and David Nadlinger were contributing. I think David was already on his way a bit out, or took himself a bit back, and Kai was the main guy in charge, I think. But there were still contributions by both guys, and I learned a lot of stuff from both of these guys. So it was about 2013. I just before a meeting, I checked my my MR history. So the first merge request that was merged for LDC was in 2013.
I see. So then, how did you get to the point where you took over as the lead maintainer?
It just happened. It really just happened. I mean, I stuck with it. So David, as I said, was already getting out a bit at that time, and Kai was quite shortly after that. I think 1 or 2 years after that, he was mainly working on a new book of his. And so suspended the contributions for that time. But unfortunately, it didn't really come back. So it was just mainly me. Back at the time, it was, so we had new contributors. I think me and Johan Engelin joined at more or less the same time to the LDC team. And Nicholas Wilson joined a bit later. So nowadays it's mostly the three guys. Nicholas doesn't do a lot of LDC development lately anymore. So it's mainly me and Johan. We're just the remaining guys, so to speak. So someone had to step up and do the release process, do the tagging, and try to maintain try to keep up with DMD development, so merging the frontend and D runtime and folders on a regular basis, then coping with CI changes, coping with LLVM upgrades, doing all of that. Just stuck with it. The circumstances allowed it. So I'm living by myself. So I don't have any girlfriend at the moment. So don't have any kids. So it means I have quite a lot of spare time. So that's what allowed me to keep on doing that.
Well,
but it's not something that I really was interested in ever. And so I would prefer if someone else took the responsibility on his shoulders or her shoulders. Right. It's just that someone has got to do it, and
Okay, well, I was going to touch on that next, because I know that, Johan actually asked me one time. We were in Berlin. It was probably DConf 2017, maybe 2016. I don't remember exactly, but I've never been a programmer by profession. It's always been a hobby for me. I was a teacher by profession for many years, and not even a programming teacher, an English teacher. And so we were chatting, Johan and Andre and I and a couple other people, and Johan looked at me. He's like, well, what are you even doing here, Mike? Why are you even coming to the conference and, doing all these conferences? I'm like, I don't know, I just enjoy it. But the thing is, once I got involved with the D Foundation, I started with a blog, and it just kind of grew from there. But once that got going, I found I had less and less time for my own projects, right? I was contributing to D so that I could, more make it better for myself to use. But then in the process, as I took on more and more responsibility, none of which has anything to do with programming, by the way, none of what I do for the foundation involves programming. But I just had no more time for my own projects. And even my bindings, my C library bindings, I eventually handed those off to somebody else because I just didn't have time to maintain them anymore. So you got involved with LDC because you were using it for your own stuff mostly. And now LDC is your own stuff, right?
Well, I hope to be able to use it. Yeah, that was the main premise. So as I said, I needed the 64-bit Windows support, which wasn't there yet. So
Right.
yeah, I just hope that, okay, let's just contribute. Let's try to get it working so that I can hopefully in some time use it and hopefully for work, so not just in my spare time. Which I get to do for some years now, and I'm really pleased with it.
Okay, cool. So you do have time for your own personal projects then outside of LDC now and again.
Well, there aren't any real projects anymore. Yeah, LDC is the main project.
Yeah, that's
it
my
sucks a lot
point.
of time.
Yeah. So by contributing to give yourself, more ability for your own projects, you say goodbye to your projects.
Plus it gets somehow addictive, I must add. Yeah.
I see.
I wouldn't say so that it's that much addictive anymore, but at the time, so some years later, I learned so many things in the process about how stuff really works on a low-level basis. Just by slowly getting into the code base and figuring out how stuff works. I'm very grateful for that. At a time, or for quite a number of years, it was very addictive, and I really had to make sure that I get enough sleep and look after myself and not get too addicted to that open source project.
Yes, I totally understand that. But I'm curious though, so you had no compiler background, you've had no project management background, correct?
No, not really.
Yeah. So without all of that behind you, without that experience, what did you find most challenging in stepping in to fill Kai's shoes when he left?
Most challenging.
Was it organizing things, deciding what to work on next? Was it implementation stuff? What?
None of the organization stuff, because that's probably one of the niceties of LDC just being a small project with very few contributors. It means there's not a lot of organizational overhead or so. If there's just 3 guys also contributing, so basically everyone took the parts that he likes working on. So Johan, for example, is mainly working on sanitizers and implementing new features coming from LLVM, new runtime libraries or so, and making that usable in LDC, which I'm very grateful for. Whereas, and he also did some other important parts like adapting to the DMD, adopting being written in D itself. That was a pretty big change, which required changes on our end as well, so, quite heavy changes. There's never a lack of things to tackle because our bug tracker on GitHub has hundreds of open issues. So that's one of the things I did at a particular time, at least, or whenever I really don't know what to do. I look at the bug tracker and try to fix some things that I find look like they could have a deeper impact. So not just affecting a niche use case, but the majority of users, or at least an important share of users. Something like this, or plus there's always the routine work. That's merging the new frontend, merging new D runtime, merging new phobos, making sure that new LLVM versions work, and keeping up to date with, or keeping CI working because base images change, 2 versions change. So that's also something. And that's actually one part where my main focus is or was, CI. So that was important just in order to make sure that the quality stays up and things don't regress. And setting that up at the beginning, I've used so many free, for open source development, free CI systems. And they died one after the other, so you had to switch another system, make it work there with the quirks there, and so most challenging. I don't really know. Maybe at the beginning it was just merging new stuff emerging, especially new language features or new features which have been built into the front end and need quite invasive changes, or potentially need quite invasive changes on our end. So in the glue layer of LDC, where we translate the ASD spit out by the front end to the LLVM representation. And in some of these cases, you need to have a bigger picture of how stuff worked in the current code base in LDC, how it was tackled. And so it was very helpful. So even though Kai and David didn't contribute that much anymore at that time, they were quite responsive whenever I had questions regarding the bigger picture. Yeah, how does that stuff work in general? How is that tackled? How can I implement that feature in the code base? And hopefully by now, my understanding is obviously much higher than it was at the beginning. So
hopefully
nowadays do this stuff ourselves.
Yeah. So that was going to be my next question. You touched on the CI there. How much of the process did you have to change or re-implement to get things? Was there a big process in place? I mean, the build system, the release system. Did you have to implement anything besides CI?
Well, the automated releases was one part of that as well. So back then at the beginning when we started, or when I joined, the thing was that releases were released by Kai. He did it himself. I think he had some virtual boxes or virtual machines or whatever on his box or somewhere, and released new versions based on that. And I thought, and I think sometimes multiple people were involved. So the Windows releases were done by another guy, and he just uploaded packages or something like this. I don't even recall that good anymore. So one of the things I thought, okay, if we're gonna keep that up, I don't want to spend time for stuff like this. Working with virtual boxes and stuff. I want to have these all automated and be as soon as we had the CI in place for the main platforms that we ship the pre-built binaries for, so Windows, Mac, and Linux, I thought, okay, it should be pretty easy, or should be feasible at least, to do the automated releases as well. And that's what I did, and which nowadays simplifies these things, as mainly just creating a new tag after making sure that everything works more or less. Creating a new tag, just letting CI do its work, upload the packages, then do the announcement in the forums, and that's basically it. So the release process is quite simple now, also for forks. It's available for forks. We use it for Symmetry Investments, for example. So that was a thing I've been working on, and which simplified my life, and hopefully the lives of future contributors and maintainers of LDC as well. So just laying the foundations there. I think that was a pretty important step.
Okay. So speaking of Symmetry, you started working for them after you took over LDC, correct?
So I'm not too sure when officially became maintainers. I was an unofficial maintainer for quite a while, I guess. But at one point, it was just too painful whenever we changed CI systems, or some CI systems at least. They needed to be integrated into the GitHub organization, where I didn't have access to. So I don't know, a couple of years ago, David then gave me and Johan these credentials. So now we are official maintainers. And I think that was before I joined Symmetry.
Okay. So working at Symmetry, do they give you time, like a day a week or something, to work on LDC, or?
Exactly. Yeah. The thing is, so I think it was in the COVID year 2020 or so, where I had to look for a new job. And I posted something on the forums saying that whether there's interest to sponsor my developments in LDC, just in order to make it sustainable. Because of that, my situation is like this. I don't have my own family, blah blah blah. So I have lots of spare time, but that might not be the case forever. So just in order to make it more sustainable, if there's some support in form of financial sponsorship, I could reduce the number of hours for the new job that I would be looking for. And that's when Symmetry Investments then contacted me directly, saying that, don't you want to work for us? And so we're going to sponsor you, but don't you want to join us in general and do it? So our current agreement is that one day a week, so a full 8 hours or so, I get paid to to do whatever I please with LDC and its D toolchain environment, which I'm very grateful for. So yeah, I would say that LDC development at its current stage is sustainable.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And Weka also contributes a lot to LDC, don't they?
Well, Johan does. So
Yeah.
as far as I know, Johan is employed by them. So yeah, in form of Johan, they do. Yeah. Other than that, there's not too much going on.
Yeah, I see. Okay, so in our monthly meetings, one of the things you're always concerned about is the glue layer, and any new language features or any. Sometimes we talk about like template emission and import C. I think there were some issues with that in the beginning. Yeah, how stable has the glue layer been? Does it give you a headache? Does it cause you sleepless nights? What?
It's not so much about stability, but it's about, so in the DMD front end, in the DMD code base, which has a lot more contributors, whenever you implement a new feature, there's multiple ways to do it. Not in general, but in some cases at least. So you can implement a feature in the glue layer, or you can implement it in the front end. So basically working on either the AC level or directly in the glue layer. And some feature might be easier to implement in the glue layer, but that means that it has to be replicated in every glue layer then by all compilers. So I have to replicate everything in LDC, and Ian has to replicate everything in GDC. And future compilers will have to implement it themselves as well. Those compilers based on the DMD front end. So what I'm always worried about is that please, if feasible, try to implement it at the ASC level, so purely in the front end, or with only marginal adaptations in the glue layer, just to simplify lives of all other compilers. Just because it's easy in the DMD code base as a single code base, so everything is in there. So it might be simpler to do it in that file, but that's part of the glue layer and it needs to be replicated by all of the other compilers. So please do it in the front end if possible. So that's one thing. And for input C specifically, I think the main problem I had was the bit fields support in there. That was, for example, one thing which, meant quite invasive changes in our glue layer because, there was one assumption here in place all over the code base, but in many parts of the code base, that, for example, every field, every member of an aggregate is addressable directly as a pointer. Okay, so no bit offset, just starting at multiples of 8 bits. Okay, so byte addressable. So I had to change that. Okay, now we have all of a sudden we have fields with the offset being okay. So you have a pointer and a bit offset and the bit length to address that. So I wasn't too happy about that at the beginning, but now we have it. It's all working. So I wasn't too happy about having it in D. That was kind of a separate discussion because then we inherit all of the quirks of the C compiler that we try to be compatible with in that regard. But we needed it at least for import C, and apparently it's not a too rare occasion to see bit fields in C headers, so it's just something that we needed anyway. So I'm glad to have it now, and that is working.
Yeah. Those I ask because often in our monthly meetings there have been numerous instances where we've had long discussions about the glue layer that make my eyes cross when I'm writing my summaries. So it's so I just had to ask about that. So I know that you've got like some LDC specific like changes or additions or whatever to D runtime. Is it like a small amount of code that you've got in there? Is it a big difference? What are the highlights?
I would say in most modules we don't have any differences at all. It's just a couple of modules. Well, maybe not a couple, but let's say a few. But I would say one-digit number of modules which are different, so which get some extensions or are even quite heavily changed. For example, one of these is, well, probably not too many guys know about it because it's not part of the bundled D runtime, so it's not something that you can import from the user code. That's the RT sections elf shared module, which originally was intended just to be used for an elf platforms, so Linux, the BSDs, blah, blah, all that. And I think only in case you were linking against a shared D runtime. But yeah, we extended the shared library support. So unlike DMD, we also support proper shared libraries, so D runtime and Phobos for macOS. That's one thing. So we generalized it to work on macOS 2. And later, 2 years ago or so, I also extended it for Windows support, and we're using it for the static. So we're linking it statically, linking the D runtime statically. That's the one module that we have. Whereas upstream, we have many different modules. So sections elf share, but there's also sections for Windows 64, with sections for sections Win32, probably a FIFO a module for macOS, and a separate module for Linux or something. Yeah, that's, for example, one of the very ugly modules that we inherited and generalized. So there's quite heavy changes in there. And there's some other stuff. I mean, all of the low-level intrinsic stuff like bitdocs, for example, or math intrinsics. So one of the basically no-brainer extensions of our D runtime is that we support most of the LLVM intrinsics that are available. So expose those and use those in D runtime. So it's not just like we expose it to be used from user code, but in Phobos and standard math, for example, we try to use those intrinsics if possible, because then it just works nicely for all supported architectures. And we don't have special cases. We don't have to use x86 ASM, which the upstream DMD implementation might use because it's x86 only. And we try to avoid that because, inline assembly is a black box for the compiler. And if the optimizer gets to understand the semantics of the thing you're trying to do, it might come up with an even better implementation than the manually crafted inline assembly that you came up with. Because there's so many different flavors of x86, all of the enhanced instruction sets that you can just enable on a command line, and the LLVM optimizer is going to take care of doing its best to fully exploit the available compute resources.
Well, I think that opens the door now nicely to LLVM. I know you've had some headaches with new LLVM versions. I believe, was it LLVM 15 that caused a lot of trouble for you?
I think it was. Yeah, that was one of the big reasons. Well, it's not like they've changed something drastically without letting us know in advance. So it was pretty clear that, okay, they have the new pass pipeline management in place. Okay, but that had been in place for quite a long time. And the opaque IR pointers. So before then, all of the it's uninteresting details. But yeah, they switched internally. The IR pointers aren't typed anymore. They used to be for quite a long time. Now they aren't anymore. And we've been using that information. So for example, we can just add extra LLVM passes. So the way LLVM works is it just changes the intermediate representation, multiple passes. There's optimization passes doing one simplification, then another pass comes in and does stuff. And you can hook into there and add some extra passes as well. That's what we do in LLVM, for example, in LDC as well. So we have a couple of those passes. And that's, for example, where we made use of that extra information. Okay, if you have a pointer, we know the IR type at least, and maybe can then derive some extra info of it. And now we can't anymore. So those were two pretty big changes. But luckily, there were contributions, so I didn't have to take care of it myself. But other guys took matters into their hands and implemented it. Yeah, so I'm very grateful for that.
And I know you've also had issues on Mac. Was it new versions of OS X sometimes change things around, internal details or something?
I'm not too sure. Sure. I just don't know what you mean in specific. The main problem I have personally with Mac is, well, first of all, I hate Apple, but that's just a minor side note. The main thing is I can't test it myself.
I'm recording this on a Mac Studio, by the way, so I don't hate Apple. The D Language Foundation does not hate Apple.
In my case, I just can't test it. So I hate having to fix something just because Apple, they changed something with their favor for closed environments and everything being Apple based. So I can't really test it myself on a legal basis, as far as I know, at least. Maybe things have changed, but back in the day, I couldn't create my own little VM with a macOS on it, which wouldn't have been legal. So I'm not sure whether anything has changed in that regard. Yeah, I just hate having to follow up on breakages introduced by Apple or new versions of their Xcode toolchain with whenever they change something. And I can't really test it myself, so I have to rely on CI, either doing it painfully via CI. Back in the day, there were some CI services which made this a bit easier because you got to have SSH access to the box. So whenever something was failing, you could at least connect to it and do some simple troubleshooting directly. And if you really only have the CI to do that, it's very painful because it might take, I don't know, something like half an hour or so, just in order to get to the point where it might break again or not. And if it breaks again, okay, next attempt, maybe wait another 30 minutes. It's just an enormous time sink.
Yeah, I think the issue I had in mind, it was something, I remember Max Houghton, I think, fixed it. It was something that was a problem to track down for a while. But anyway, yeah, I was just curious about that. Well, if I wanted to contribute to LDC today, if some random LDC user wants to contribute to LDC today, what's the best way to contribute? What would be most beneficial? What would have the most impact on your work right now?
You mean from the impact perspective? Well, for me, I don't know. I mean, merging merging a new frontend or so, that really requires. Sometimes it's easy. For some reason, it's easy. But if a new feature comes in, it might be problematic. So it might take, a bit of understanding of how things work. So that's not something which can easily be done by just random contributors without a lot of experience. But other than that, I mean, working on miscellaneous issues that we have, I mean, we have hundreds of those. I think we have something like 400 or 450 open issues. Not all of those are really proper issues or issues that can easily be worked on. But there's just no shortage on those. But I don't think there are too many LDC-specific issues. If they are, okay, obviously feel free to try to fix them. But I think the main things are upstream. Okay, so the main interesting things. So, trying to finish a feature which has been maybe not fully completed in upstream yet, or which just gives a little bit of So the most impact you can have is probably upstream whenever you talk about language changes. If you're talking about other architectures, that's a very nice thing, and actually I think one of the fields we get most contributions from, even from very skilled people, because maybe they're working on the same architecture themselves. So I think we had a contribution just for the Loom Arch. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's the Chinese architecture, the new one, which is kind of a mixture of MIPS and ARM or something. I think we get a very, very nice contribution from some guy in Canada, I think. And I'm not sure whether he works for those guys, whether he's employed by the company, but he obviously knows his stuff. So I'm not sure whether he did some contributions to Clang as well, or maybe to LLVM directly, and did it for us. So he's been working upstream D Runtime in the DMD repository, just adding some D Runtime support, but working on the LDC compiler specifically as well. One thing which is kind of annoying but can also be very interesting at times is that, unlike for GDC, so I've been talking to Ian, so apparently for GDC, conquering a new architecture isn't that difficult. So if we leave D Runtime aside and just look at the compiler part, it's apparently quite easy for GDC or GCC-based compilers. Whereas for LLVM, well, calling conventions and all of that stuff, that's not really part of the IR, and it is to some degree, but it just means that you're going to have to take care of all the little platform quirks and platform specifics in every compiler, and which means that for us, as we want to be C compatible and C++ compatible, var args, varetics. It's also a very annoying part of it. And it's, for example, the varetics, that's one requirement to make the compiler itself work. It uses varetics in places. So getting that right can be challenging. And so conquering a new platform with LDC is more difficult than with GDC, as far as I've been told. But it can be very interesting. And that's where a guy with knowledge of the particular platform and a high interest in that new platform can really make a difference.
Yeah, I see. Well, you mentioned merging the front end changes, and I know if my memory is correct, there used to be more lag time between DMD D versions and LDC versions, and you narrowed that quite a bit and managed to get them out much more quickly. Now, how did you manage to do that?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons was the automation of the releases that I spoke about earlier. So integrating the release package generation, blah, 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 integrating that into the CI. That was one part of it. So we don't have to coordinate between different people. Please upload that package. Please tell one do that. So that's what enabled that. And I think that was mainly it. Plus, it also came with, so as the DMD, the time spans between DMD releases went down, it also meant that the changes from one version to the next aren't that large anymore. Back in the day when we had about 2 DMD releases per year or so, well, a lot of things can happen in half a year. So just adapting to, because it's not a continuous process. So I do it stepwise. So whenever there's a new minor version, which in our case is almost a major version, so D 2.106 to 2.107 or so is just a minor bump, but incorporates quite a bit of changes. So whenever the new version is available as a beta or so, or sometime later when I find the time, I get to merge the stuff. So Phobos is very simple most of the time. Runtime can be simple, but if it touches one of these modules, these heavily modified modules that I talked about earlier, you might be in for a treat. But it's mainly about the front end changes. And as we have LDC-specific changes in there, you might end up with merge conflicts as well. Have to look at the stuff. And the main thing is new features or new command line switches, which might or might not need to be implemented. In most cases, they need to be implemented, and which might require some extra work. So, for example, the bit fields thing, that was one thing which was immediately clear that I wouldn't be able to immediately release a new LDC version quickly after the DMD release. That's one thing, for example, which took quite a while longer. If there aren't any large or big breaking changes, we can be quite close. Maybe not on the same day. I think we had some releases where the first LDC beta was released on the same day as the DMD release. But that's an outlier, I'd say, and not the regular case. But I try to keep it quite close, at least. That's mainly for library developers, so that they can more or less rely on, that at least LDC and DMD are going to be in sync, more or less, with maybe 1 month of time in between. And so that they don't have to support a whole range of different Runtime, Phobos APIs, or even language versions. You can just use the latest one, more or less.
Well, let's shift gears just a little bit to bring this to the finish line. Then let's get off of the compiler for a minute and talk about the language. Now, you've been involved with our monthly meetings for quite a while now, and the quarterlies, and you also participate sometimes in our planning sessions. So we're looking ahead, we're looking at additions, we're looking at tying off some loose ends and some potential new features like sum types and tuples and all this. What are your hopes for D going forward? Are there any, what new features are you interested in seeing, or what changes are you interested in? What do you think is the most important thing we need to be fixing right now? What does Martin Kinkelin think about the future of the D language? What do we need?
Well, I must say that it took quite a while, quite a number of years for me to get involved with the D Language Foundation and the DMD ecosystem. So for quite a number of years, I was fully restricted or limited to LDC, just doing my little stuff in there, where we don't have any discussions or hardly any discussion because there's three guys of us.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I wasn't really interested in the language development itself. I mean, it's the one place. So if you really want to change the language or implement a new feature, that's obviously the place you need to look at, and not LDC. It's just for speed or for conquering new platforms. So yeah, that's one field which I'm not really interested in, mainly because I think that the features that we have already suffices. I mean, I'm using it on a daily basis now, as I said, working for Symmetry. So for some years, there's not too many pain points. I mean, the main pain points are still existing compiler bugs related to template emission, for example, so getting weird link errors but we have workarounds in place. I know about workarounds, how we can fix those. So about language features, well, one thing that I wanted to see for quite a while now, as I've been also working on some little script-like utilities, making use of so having involving lots of string literals and joining strings, concatenating strings. So string interpolation. That was one of the features that I've been missing. Some other features I would have liked to see at one point, I'm not too sure whether that's still very important, is the Elvis-like operator. So, the question mark colon or the double question mark, something like this, just in order to shorten the ternary expressions or so. It's so nothing really big, I would think. It's more string interpolation. That's mainly it.
And we've got that now. It was just merged.
Yeah, right. Other than that, I would say, I'm very pleased with the syntax. Obviously, I just love the expressibility of D, and it's just all very nice and elegant. So from the feature side, not too much. It's mainly just making it a bit more robust and trying to fix as many as we can. That's the main thing.
Okay, great. Well then, before we go, is there anything you want to tell people about any plans you might have for LDC? Any requests you might have? Anything you want to tell LDC viewers in the audience? Now's your chance.
Nothing really. I just hope that in time some new contributors step up and assume some responsibility, just in case that I would be retiring a bit or stepping a bit back. And if Johan Engelin did, we wouldn't be in a good shape. So we need some fresh blood in that sense. That's my main worry, so to speak. As said, I don't really like my role in there. I'm okay with it, but I definitely wouldn't mind if there were some other guys where I can put some responsibility on their shoulders instead of having it on mine.
I see. All right, so those of you watching, you heard that. There is room at the top for LDC. You can depose Martin and take his place. He's happy to let you in. Bring the coup.
Absolutely.
All right. Martin, thanks so much for agreeing to participate with me in this today. And to those of you watching, I'm hoping to make this a monthly event with a different member of the D community each month. That was my initial idea when I first had these conversations with Walter, but it's been a while now. But now that we've got Martin here, we're putting him out this month in January. You should be seeing this at the last weekend of January when I'm publishing it. So I expect to have more coming once a month going forward, now and forever. And all right,
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. And I'll see you at the next meeting.
See ya. Bye-bye.